Good Sunday morning. It is February 9, 2020. In episode 17, I want to talk to you about the love of Kirk Douglas. In headlines, before we start that, the coronavirus death toll is at 810 and counting. That surpassed the number of fatalities from the SARS outbreak in 2003. There are 37,000 confirmed cases worldwide. When you do the math, the fatality rate is very, very low. So you should not be worried. Just take protection. Now, on to today's episode about love as we lead up and get closer to Valentine's Day. It's Oscar night as well. And you know, when you think about the life of an actor, there aren't very many that have long marriages. There was an article in the LA Times from June of 2014 that was written by Kirk Douglas himself. And you know, he passed away just a few days ago at the age of 103. In that article, he looked at his 60 years of marriage. Well, of course, he was married more than that, but this was back, 6 years ago. He begins his article in 1953, which is when he was in Paris and he met Anne Bidens, who became his second wife, and who he, as I mentioned, was married for 65 plus years. You know, initially she turned Douglas down twice. Once when he offered her a job on his production company, and the second time when he tried to impress her to take her to dinner. And because she didn't impress him, Douglas was impressed himself, and he became determined to win her over. Well, we all know he got the girl. In those early decades, he shares in his LA Times article in 2014, that he was in awe of her for sticking with him. It was during a period when he had a lot of anger and a lot of arrogance, as he explains it. Now, when you're newly married, you know that there is that 7-year struggle, and who knows, it can last on forever for many people, and it often breaks couples apart. So that is something that happens. You also fight about money and jealousy, problems with your mother-in-law, and who knows what else. Interestingly, Douglas claims that Anne never tried to change him. Well, you know, that's a mistake that a lot of wives make. Trying to change your husband, it doesn't work. But he says she never hesitated to speak her mind. Oh, that's a mistake many wives also make. But what he found appealing was that when she did speak her mind, she did it with humor. She was gentle and she was very subtle. So yes, eventually, he says, she did change his outlook and how he saw things. So although he says she didn't try to change him, then he says, well, yeah, she did change him. He honors her for joining him as a goodwill ambassador for the U.S. Information Agency, where they traveled to 40 countries over 20 years. And you remember that he actually received a presidential medal of freedom, but she didn't. That highest civilian honor, he thought, should have gone to her too. As if one medal in the family wasn't enough. He wanted her to have her own medal. Remember that first job that she turned down? Well, she ended up running Douglas's production company instead of working in it. She was also a philanthropist, rebuilding 401 Los Angeles Unified School District playgrounds. There's even an Ann Douglas Center at the LA Mission named in her honor. But Douglas's greatest claim to honoring his wife and the love of his life was that she saved his life more than once. The first time I mentioned before was that she refused to let Douglas join Mike Todd on his fateful private jet. He says Elizabeth Taylor became a widow, but not his Anne. He said that they had stopped speaking that night until they heard the news the next morning. Fights do happen, even to the best of the couples. And the second time that Anne saved her husband's life was when Douglas had his stroke. She drove him to the hospital like a Formula One racer. Because of her insistence that he work with a speech therapist due to his impaired speech, he wrote her love poems for her tough love. And I always love that question where you ask people, why or what is it that makes a marriage last? Well, a friend of his asked Douglas when they were celebrating his 60th wedding anniversary. And he replied, "Oh, that's easy. I told my wife, if you ever leave me, I'm going with you." He was remembered for being a tough actor. And that's the exterior side that others saw. But all you tough ones out there really know, including myself, that on the inside is a much gentler person. Sometimes we portray ourselves as tough on the outside to protect that gentle side inside. It is said that you don't really get to know someone until you live with them. That's true. But there are many red flags and signs that you should look for that tell you who a true person's colors are. And as we near Valentine's Day, I will share more about relationships and about my experiences with love. So stay tuned for my upcoming episode of Where is Harry?, which I'll share with you on Valentine's Day. So I hope that you will enjoy your Oscars tonight and leading up into Valentine's week this week, coming up on Friday, February 14. We're less than a week away. Do you have a Valentine in mind? Do you have someone special in your life? If you do, I'll make sure to honor them. Don't wait just for that special day. Do it every day. Write them a love letter. Write them a poem. And if you don't have someone, I want you to let them know. Because I know sometimes people are afraid to share their feelings and they're afraid of rejection. And even though, that girl might be tough on the outside, if you know how to get to her heart, then she could be yours forever. So go ahead and profess your love. And you know what? If she turns you down, try again. Because if she doesn't take the bait, it's her loss, not yours.